Guys, what's up? I was recently having a conversation with Daniel, as you can see in front of my screen on LinkedIn, and he mentioned how you never start with a design system, period, and how you should actually focus on creating 15 screens without any system. I mean, obviously you should never start with the design system because when you're creating something, you don't really know what you're creating or the type of components that are going to be there. You can maybe start with an input component or a button component or something along those lines, but definitely you can't really start with a complete design system. So I mentioned it to him that we can actually take a middle ground, and as you're creating pages, let's say if you have to create a 15-page website. So I'm going to show an example of a website. This is the OCaml website design that I actually did a while back. Now imagine I created this first page, even if it's not final. Obviously a page or any website is going to have a header and it's going to have a footer normally. So when I'm actually done with the header first, even if I have to make tons of changes later on, before moving to the second page, why shouldn't I make my header a component? Because again, this is exploratory, right? I mean, before actually creating those 15 pages, I should make my header and footer a component. So anytime new ideas come to mind, or maybe I have to add a link, or maybe I have to do something else with the header, I don't have to manually go ahead and update headers in all of those 15 pages. It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. I went ahead and actually mentioned that to him, that we can take a middle ground, and whenever you create an element like a drop down or an input or a button or a header or a footer that's supposed to look very similar across all of these different pages, you should create it as a component so you don't have to go through the manual labor of experimenting with it individually on each particular page. Because let's say if you actually want to update the header, I've already given that example, I don't want to give it again, but he was even disagreeing with that. Sometimes it usually happens when you actually take a public stance on something, even if it doesn't make sense, at least it doesn't make sense to me, you usually have to stick by it to look as an authority or feel like you actually have figured out what you're talking about. And I just don't think this is the case. But I mean, even if it is, and this has happened to me, I think internally as well, because obviously I run a design team and I have a bunch of designers under me as well. Sometimes it has happened where a particular designer has created multiple screens of an application, and he was obviously exploring that application. So 15 screens or 20 screens or something. And they've actually used a card, a type of a card that has, let's say, a price, some label, some tags, and a bunch of different elements. And obviously these values of these elements, like the tags, the text of the tag, the color of the tag, the title of the price, or something along those lines, a bunch of these different elements have changed, but they're very similar. The component is the same. It's not even a component, but the element is the same, and it's being used in, let's say, 50 places in these 20 screens. Now, even if you create it or make it a component, how hard it is to actually update all of those different values, all of those different elements with the instances of this new component, by making sure that the value and the labels and everything are actually going to be the same. It's insane. Even if you don't have to make it, even if you decide tomorrow that, hey, I don't really like the border radius on this element, I should actually make it 8 pixels instead of 4 pixels. Are you going to select each of those 50 different instances and update it? I mean, it's insane. So I definitely don't agree with this. I would definitely recommend you save yourself some time and actually work smartly and be clever when you're actually doing designs and are exploring things. So that's going to be pretty much it. Do subscribe, do hit the bell icon. I know this was a long rant, but I think since I've actually personally experienced it with my own designers as well, I actually wanted to give this a shout out so that other designers don't make this horrible mistake.